There's a kind of woman who walks into a room and something shifts, not because she's trying to own it, she's not. It's more subtle than that. She simply doesn't need the room to validate her. And that, strangely, is exactly what makes everyone in it want to. Ambitious men notice this, not consciously at first. It's more of a feeling, a pull towards someone who has clearly built a life they're proud of, who isn't quietly auditioning for approval. And the harder truth, the one most dating advice dances around without actually saying, is this. The behaviors that push these men away are rarely dramatic. They're quiet, everyday, often disguised as love. Let's start with something that sounds almost too simple to matter. Self-sufficiency. Not the performative kind, the I don't need anyone armor that people wear when they've been hurt. Real self-sufficiency, the kind where your sense of self isn't quietly dependent on how much attention someone gives you, or whether he texted back within the hour, or whether the relationship is moving at a pace that reassures you. It's having a life, your own genuine, specific, irreplaceable life, that you would be living whether or not he was in it. This isn't a dating strategy. It's not a tactic. It's something far more honest than that. A man who is genuinely driven by his work, his goals, the particular version of himself he's trying to become, doesn't want to be someone's entire world. That sounds harsh when you say it plainly. But think about it from the inside. Imagine carrying the weight of being another person's primary source of meaning. It doesn't feel like love after a while. It feels like responsibility. And responsibility, when it's unasked for, quietly becomes resentment. What attracts him, what genuinely holds his attention, is a woman whose life has its own gravity. Her happiness isn't contingent on his. Her identity doesn't reshape itself around his preferences. She chooses him, clearly and deliberately, but she doesn't need him the way someone needs air. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Being chosen freely is one of the most compelling things a person can experience. Being needed out of emotional scarcity is something else entirely. Now here's where it gets a little uncomfortable. Because the behavior that probably pushes ambitious men away more than any other isn't cruelty, or conflict, or even incompatibility. It's being too nice. Not kind. Kindness is something different, something with a backbone to it. People-pleasing. The specific, exhausting performance of never having a preference that inconveniences anyone, never pushing back, smoothing every edge, making yourself endlessly accommodating in the hope that this, surely this, will make you impossible to leave. It doesn't work. And somewhere, if you've done it, you probably already know that. Here's why. An ambitious man is, by definition, someone who engages with challenge. His entire orientation toward life is about growth, which requires friction, resistance, something that pushes back. When a woman has dissolved herself into the relationship, when she has no sharp edges left, when every response is shaped around what she thinks he wants to hear, she becomes, without meaning to, invisible. Not unappreciated, not disliked, just invisible. Like a room that's so perfectly tidy it has no personality. The psychology underneath people-pleasing is almost always the same. It comes from a place of not quite trusting that you are enough as you actually are. So you compensate by being maximally useful, maximally agreeable, maximally present. It makes a kind of emotional sense, but it creates a dynamic that is exhausting for both people. She gives and gives without asking. He senses, without being able to name it, that something is off. That the relationship is all give and no real texture. And slowly, without either of them fully understanding how it happened, the spark just isn't there anymore. The shift required here is not dramatic. It's not about becoming someone colder or more withholding. It's about trusting that your actual opinions, your actual needs, your actual disagreements are not threats to the relationship. They are the relationship. A woman who can look at her partner and say calmly, "No, I see that differently," or "I need this, and it matters to me," is someone worth staying curious about. Someone who only ever mirrors back what she thinks he wants to see. That's not intimacy, that's a performance. And performances eventually wear thin. There's another behavior that tends to surface in relationships with driven people, and it comes entirely from love. That almost makes it harder to address. Smothering. Not in the obvious, dramatic way, not the jealousy or the constant checking of phones. The quieter version. The way a woman can start organizing her entire life around her partner's schedule. The way she's always available, always present, always ready, until the sheer constancy of her availability starts to feel less like love and more like pressure. Ambitious men need space in a way that isn't always easy to explain, especially when you're on the receiving end of it. It can feel personal, like distance, like something is wrong. But most of the time, it has nothing to do with how he feels about you. It has everything to do with how he functions. His focus, his energy, his ability to think clearly, these require solitude, not forever, not most of the time, but genuinely, without apology. When a woman can't give him that, when every hour he spends alone feels like a negotiation, when space becomes something she tolerates rather than genuinely offers, it creates a low-grade anxiety in the relationship that doesn't go away. He starts to feel managed, she starts to feel rejected. Neither of them wants this. But it happens, slowly and almost imperceptibly, when one person has made the other person their primary project. The solution isn't indifference. It's investment. In yourself, in your own goals, your own time, your own sense of what a fulfilling day looks like independent of him. The paradox is almost annoyingly simple. The more fully you inhabit your own life, the more he wants to be part of it. The more you wait for him to come home, the heavier coming home starts to feel. There's something else worth naming. Harder to define, but you feel its absence immediately when it's gone. Mystery. This word gets misused constantly in dating conversations. It becomes code for playing games, being deliberately unavailable, manufacturing uncertainty to keep someone interested. That's not what this is. That's not mystery. That's just anxiety dressed up as strategy. And it doesn't work. Real mystery comes from having an inner life that is genuinely your own. From being a person of some depth and complexity that cannot be fully captured in a first conversation, or a third, or a 10th. It comes from not feeling the compulsive need to explain yourself completely, to justify every feeling, to fill every silence with something that will make sure he understands you, approves of you, is still interested in you. The need to constantly be understood is in its own way a kind of insecurity. And ambitious men who are themselves complex, who have interior lives they guard carefully, can sense it. What they're drawn to is a woman who holds herself with a certain quiet confidence, who shares herself thoughtfully, with intention, who doesn't need to perform transparency as a form of emotional insurance. There's a practical dimension to this too. When you're genuinely living your own life, when you have things you're working toward, creative or professional or personal pursuits that matter to you, you naturally have less bandwidth to over-explain and overshare. You're busy, you're interested in things. You have opinions formed from your own experience. That full, textured, self-possessed quality is without any effort, magnetic. Finally, and maybe most importantly, your ambitions matter. Not as a performance, not to seem impressive, but because a relationship where one person is pursuing something and the other is only supporting that pursuit is, quietly, over time, an unequal one. An inequality in a relationship doesn't stay neutral, it accumulates. The person doing all the supporting starts to feel unseen. The person being supported starts to feel vaguely guilty, or worse, starts to take the support for granted without quite realizing it. Ambitious men are not, despite the occasional cultural narrative, intimidated by a woman who has her own goals. The ones worth keeping are actively looking for her. They want someone who challenges them, not aggressively, not competitively, but by being a full person who is going somewhere, someone whose growth makes them want to grow, someone they can be proud of not just because of how she makes them feel, but because of what she's actually doing with her life. This is what gets lost when women subordinate their dreams to their partners. Not just the individual ambitions themselves, but the version of herself that was most compelling in the first place. The self-assurance that came from working toward something, the particular energy of a woman who knows what she wants and is moving toward it. Support in a relationship should feel reciprocal, not perfectly balanced in every moment. Relationships don't work like accounting, but fundamentally mutual. You invest in his growth, he invests in yours. You celebrate his wins, he makes space for yours. Anything short of that, over time, stops feeling like partnership and starts feeling like service. And service, no matter how lovingly rendered, is not the same as love. None of this is about becoming someone harder, colder, more strategic. That's not the point. The point is simpler and in some ways more demanding. Become more fully yourself. The woman who is genuinely building something, who can be kind without disappearing, who gives him space not because she's suppressing the urge to cling, but because she genuinely has her own life to return to. Who is warm but not endlessly accommodating, who is open but still in some essential way her own. That woman doesn't have to chase anyone. She rarely needs to. At the end of the day, none of this is about strategy. It's not about making yourself harder to reach or carefully engineering how you're perceived. It's simpler than that, and honestly, more demanding. The behaviors that quietly push ambitious men away all share the same root: losing yourself. Losing yourself in his schedule, in his approval, in the constant project of making sure he's happy, present, interested. It feels like love when you're doing it. From the inside, it can feel like devotion, like loyalty, like proof that you care deeply. But over time, it hollows something out, in you first, and then, almost inevitably, in the relationship itself. What began as tenderness slowly becomes a kind of invisible weight that neither person knows quite how to name. What keeps a driven man genuinely invested isn't perfection or endless availability or selfless devotion. It's a woman who has something of her own, a life that has weight and direction and meaning that exists independently of him. Her own ambitions she's quietly working toward, her own opinions she isn't afraid to voice, her own sense of what she deserves that doesn't shift depending on his mood or his attention, or how many days have passed since he last made her feel seen. That kind of presence doesn't demand attention. It earns it. Naturally, without performance, without tactics, without the exhausting calculus of always trying to be exactly what someone else needs. And here's what most people don't say plainly enough. You cannot give what you've already given away. When you've dissolved yourself into a relationship, when your identity has become so entangled with his that you've lost the thread of who you actually are, there's nothing left to be curious about. Nothing left to discover. The mystery that keeps attraction alive isn't manufactured through games or deliberate distance. It's the natural byproduct of a woman who is still, genuinely becoming someone, who has chapters of herself she hasn't shared yet. Not because she's withholding, but because she's still writing them. That process never stops. It shouldn't. The most compelling thing about a person isn't where they've arrived. It's that they're still moving, still growing, still surprised by themselves occasionally. An ambitious man understands this instinctively because it's how he lives. And what he wants, more than he may ever explicitly say, is someone beside him who lives that way too. Someone who doesn't need rescuing. Someone who doesn't need constant reassurance that the relationship is okay, that he's still interested, that she is still enough. Because she already knows she's enough, not from arrogance, but from the quiet, unshakable foundation of a life she has actually built. That certainty is rare. And rarity, in the most human sense, is magnetic. So the real work here was never about him. It was always about you. Your goals, your boundaries, your willingness to take up space without apologizing for it. To ask for what you need without dressing it up as something smaller. To be kind without becoming invisible. Warm without becoming consuming. Supportive without being so selfless that you one day look up and barely recognize yourself. Because the woman who knows who she is, who pursues her own life with genuine investment, who loves openly but never desperately, who gives freely but never at the cost of herself. That woman doesn't have to chase anyone. She doesn't have to wonder if she's too much or not enough, or if she should have said less or given more or waited longer to reply. She simply lives, fully, deliberately, on her own terms. And the right man doesn't pull away from that. He leans in, he stays. And somewhere along the way, without either of them quite planning it, they build something that actually lasts.